Welcome, Chess Endgame fans. The position in this video arose in a simul game given by Grandmaster Gata Kamsky on his Twitch stream. Now, the practice of a chess master playing numerous amateurs simultaneously is by far the most common way that a title player can compete against weaker opponents. And this replaced the old habit of games played at piece odds or pawn and move odds. And the internet has revolutionized the simultaneous feature of chess, as with other features of the game. Formerly at a simul, everybody was physically present in one place, and the grandmaster would walk inside the perimeter of a rectangle set out with chessboards typically. And when the grandmaster arrived at your board, you had to move, or you could say pass. And when you did move, the grandmaster would reply very quickly and move on to the next board. Now, as the games concluded, the grandmaster's circuit time reduced, and that reduced your thinking time. Now, on rare occasions, a grandmaster might give as an alternative a clock simul, but this didn't happen very often, and clock simuls typically featured a relatively small number of opponents. But a clock simul gave the participants much more flexibility over thinking time, and less time per game for the grandmaster, since all of the clocks typically had the same time allocation. Now, in internet simuls, the technology gives the grandmaster the opportunity to give what amounts to a clock simul against a much larger number of opponents. And typically, the simul giver will let the opponents have a rapid time control. Gata Kamsky generously gives his opponents 30 minutes thinking time and 60 seconds increment each time a move is made. And the grandmaster would themselves take a time premium. So Gata, for example, might have 60 minutes endowment plus the 60 seconds increment. And this avoids the grandmaster misjudging the simul and losing a clutch of games on time. But it is an unwritten rule that the grandmaster moves briskly and doesn't use all of the time that is allocated. Okay, the other thing to note is that since the grandmaster, unlike a physical simultaneous, doesn't go from board to board in sequence, it is presented with a board after an opponent moves, it's much harder for the grandmaster to keep track of the positions. All right, well, let's just introduce Gata Kamsky properly. He's a 5 times United States chess champion, and in his early 20s attained a peak world ranking of number 4. Before taking a 7-year break from the game. He came back to chess in 2004 and again achieved very good results indeed, but is now essentially retired from professional tournament play, but streams regularly on Twitch. And if you want to play Gata Kamsky, then become a subscriber, and you can take him on in his weekly simul, which he gives against subscribers to his channel. Now, his opponent in this game is an unknown player, identified only by his live chess handle Mixflitch Tixniction. Okay, well, let's turn now to the position and try and evaluate it. Kamsky is playing black, and he's a pawn down in a knight ending. And white has the more active king on d4, and he has this passed c-pawn. So they're two big assets. But black's problems, however, are compounded by the fact that his pawn stands on a5. And on this advanced square, it's exposed. Now, were this pawn instead to be on its starting square of a7, it would be much harder for white to get at. And the fact that black is currently able to blockade white's passed c-pawn would ensure a fairly easy draw, but with the pawn on a5, things are not easy at all. Now, knight endings are tricky, but in this simul, both players had plenty of time to devote to the ending. I mean, white in this position had about 25 minutes plus 60-second increment, and black had well over an hour. But this was the last game to finish in the simul, and in these situations there's often a tendency to rush, and we also need to bear in mind that Gata Kamsky by this stage was very tired. He gave the simul after a blitz tournament, so he'd had a pretty long day. Okay, well let's see what happened. In this position it was black's move, and Kamsky played 6. Attacking the knight. So where should the knight e6 go to? Well, the answer is g5. It turns out that this is a key square for both players in this ending, as we will see. So if white were to go knight g5 here, well, he prevents black from playing the move knight c5 because knight c5 could be answered by knight e4 check, forcing an exchange of knights. And that would result in a one king and pawn ending. So instead, black has to just go back, has to mark time with his king, with king c6. And now white can go knight f3. And notice how he has the threat of going knight e5 check. Again, that would force a trade of knights. So black counters by marking time again with king d6. And now there's a very clever little waiting move that white has available. So he can go a3. That's very, very cunning. And now after knight c5, then white goes knight d2, threatening knight e4. So black marks time with king c6. So here white's got to be a little bit careful, and he needs to maneuver to set up a one position. So let's look at a couple of tries here, and we'll see what happens if white doesn't take care. So first of all, it looks as though white can go king e5, penetrating with his king. But in fact, this would be a mistake, and all of a sudden black's knight would become very active. So black can go knight d3 check. And after the white king comes back to d4, then black's got this clever move, knight c1. And all of a sudden, there's this idea of going a4 and knight b3. And white has to reckon with this defensive idea. And if white stops a4 by going a4 himself, then black goes knight e2. Check. And after king d3, then black can harass the king. He can go knight c1 check. And after king c2, then the knight just goes back to e2. And the knight, perpetually harasses white's king, and this is sufficient to save the game. Okay, so king e5 isn't good. And another move that isn't good in this position is the equally natural move knight e4, attacking the knight. But again, the problem with this move is that black's knight again becomes very active. Black goes knight b3 check. And after white attacks the knight with king c3, then black again goes knight c1 with the same basic idea of harassing white's king. And it's not possible to make progress from this position. So again, let's go back to the start position. So we've looked at king e5 and we've looked at knight e4, and neither of these natural moves were sufficient. But there is a way for white to maneuver to improve the position of his pieces, and what he can do here is to play the clever move king c3. Black will go knight a4 check. White goes king b3. So black says, okay, I'll give another check. Go knight c5 check. And now there's a clever little move. White doesn't go to c3, but he goes to c2 with his king. This is a very, very nice move. So now if black goes king b6, then white can simply go knight b3. and that forces forces an exchange, or enables white to make progress. That gains control of some key squares. Okay, and if instead black goes knight a4, then white can play knight b3, attacking the a pawn. And after black defends that pawn, then white can go king d2. Black attacks the c pawn, goes knight b2. So white defends it. Black checks again, moving his attack knight. And white goes king d4. And now there's nothing better than to go knight b2, but white can then advance the pawn. And notice how white's king and knight have improved their position in this variation. And so white's able to make progress and bring about a winning position. Okay. Alright, let's go back to the position where Kamsky played king d6, hitting the knight e6. And we've seen that knight g5 would have been a very strong move. In knight endings, you want to think about circuits, and g5 is on a key winning circuit for white. And that's why the move knight f4, which is what was played, was nowhere near as strong. And it immediately allows black to improve the position of his knight by going knight c5. And we saw that if the knight was on g5, this knight c5 move is just not possible. Because there's a kind of correspondence between the squares c5, g5, and e4 in this position. So the knight on f4 is misplaced. It's not on the right circuit. Okay, so white played knight d3, attacking the knight c5 from this square. And now black went knight e6 check. And notice how now it's black's knight that has got access to this g5 square. White played king c3. And this brought about a very instructive position indeed. There's only one drawing move for black here. And if you've been listening to the video, you won't surprise you to discover that it is indeed this knight g5 move. It's a beautiful move. So if white goes king d4, then black's simply going to retreat the position with knight e6 check. So white's going to have to try something else here. Can't really go c5 check because king d5 and the king has improved its position and is now an even better blockader of that pawn. So what else is there? Well, the only thing that white can really do is just to try a waiting move. So he can try this a3 move, which worked out well for him in the other variation. Let's see what good it does here. Black's king marks time with king c6. White goes king b3, trying to round up the a pawn. Black's knight comes to e4 from g5. And now after king a4, then black has got this knight c5 check move. And the point is that the simplification brings about a drawn king and pawn ending, although black still has got to be a little bit careful. So white would have to take the knight. Black recaptures. And now if white were to take the a pawn, black takes the c pawn, and it's a drawn ending of king and rook's pawn versus king. So instead, white does better to go back with king b3. And now black's got to take care. So it would be a mistake to go a4 here, trying to simplify, because white would not take that pawn, but would play the move king c3. And now that gains the opposition. Notice how the kings are opposed. But black has to give way. And so that would be a lost king and pawn ending. So instead, black plays the move king d4, trying to infiltrate. Well, white has got one more waiting move. He's got a pawn move available, and that's a4. So the question is, well, what does black play in this position to hold the draw? Well, it turns out there's only one move that draws, and it's a fantastic drawing move, and that is the move King E5. Now, to explain why King E5 draws, let's just consider some of the alternatives. So if black goes King C5, well, we've already seen what happens. White goes King C3, gains the opposition, and that forces a 1 king and pawn ending. So we can eliminate King C5. If black goes King D3, well, that's going to lose as well, because white can now just push the pawn, and black's king is not in time to stop that pawn. So King D3 is also no good. So well, what about King E4 though? Isn't that a draw? Well, it turns out that that this also loses. Let's just see why. White goes King C3, black goes King E5, white goes King D3, black goes King D6, and now white goes King D4, and again gains the opposition, leading to a 1 king and pawn ending. So the only move left to try is King E5. And after white goes King C3, well, black plays King E4. And suddenly black's king stops the white king in its tracks. Black's in fact winning the c-pawn from this position. And that is going to lead to a drawn position. If white goes C5, black just rounds that pawn up. And if white goes King B3, then black goes King D4 and wins the c-pawn next move and draws the game. Okay, so let's go back. So from here, knight G5 would have been a draw, a remarkable draw. And I think that Kamsky would have found knight G5 in a classical tournament game. And he probably would have found it in the simul as well if he'd thought for long enough. But instead, he played very quickly the incorrect move, King C6 in this position. And now after knight E5 check, King D6 attacking the knight, well, white found the excellent move knight F3, and now he's on the circuit. That's where the knight wants to be positioned. This F3 square has a relationship with G5, and that is really the key to understanding this ending. So black went knight C5, proving the position of the knight. White went knight D2, and now there's a threat of King D4, so that's why black played King E5 to stop white occupying the D4 square. And here, Mixflix Tix Nixton chose the very tempting move knight B3. Again, very, very natural, but it allowed Kamsky to escape with a draw. Let's just see how the Grandmaster drew the game from here. So he played knight to E4 check and King D3, and now he found the drawing idea. He played knight F2 check, which is excellent, harassing white's king. After King E2, the knight went back to E4, and after King E3, then the knight went to C3, attacking the A2 pawn. And if white goes A3 here, then black is going to go knight B1, and after A4, black is going to go knight C3. And so that is why white bowed to the inevitable, took the A pawn, and after black recaptured knight takes A2, the players agreed a draw. Okay, well, let's go back. So again, that knight B3, a very natural move, but not sufficient. Instead, white can in fact win this position, and he wins by deploying his A3 waiting move. He plays A3, it's an excellent move. Now after knight a4 check, king d3, knight c5 check, king e3, white again is taking the opposition. And black has to give way, and black now only has the choice of how he wants to lose. So he can lose prosaically, or he can lay a trap and lose beautifully. So a prosaic loss would be to play move a4, knight f3 check, king d6, white's king occupies d4, knight b3 check, white goes king c3, and notice how a4 has left a big hole on b4. That's going to be the key to winning the game. So after knight c5, black can go king c5, but white goes knight g5. Notice the significance of that g5 square again, and either knight e6 or knight e4 check, driving the king away, is coming. So knight c5, king b4, king c6, knight e5 check, king d6, and now there's a nice little move that would round the game off, and that is king b5. King takes knight, king takes knight. That's winning. If black doesn't take the knight, any king move loses the knight on c5, and if the knight moves away, then white is going to play knight d3, and then it's going to capture the a pawn. So that would have been a prosaic way of losing. So let's go back. So instead of a4, better is to play the move knight a4, and because this at least does lay a little trap. White goes knight b3, attacking the pawn on a5. Black goes knight c3, and the trap is if white is greedy and plays a hasty capture, knight takes a5, because black has got knight b1, and after a4, then black goes knight c3. There's no way of defending the a pawn, and so this would save the game. This would be a draw. But instead of playing knight takes a5, white plays king d3, attacking the knight. And after knight b1, then white goes a4, and this is a completely won position now, because the a pawn is now lost. White's going to go knight takes a5. Okay, so a very instructive ending, and illustrating just the idea of a knight being on the right circuit, deployment of the opposition, and the use of waiting moves. So three very interesting illustrative themes in endings. Thank you for watching.